Hi guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel and welcome to one of my favorite videos of the month besides my monthly reset. We are going to talk about all the books that I read this month. I read some good ones, I read some bad ones, I read some overhyped books, I read some new releases. It was a very interesting reading month and I'm super excited to get into it. Also, I hope you enjoyed this new setup. We've got Stella here. And before we get into it, I know there's gonna be at least one person who watches my videos for the first time and says, that girl reads a lot of books, how does she do it? So I like to give you guys a little quick synopsis at the beginning of the video so you guys can understand, because a huge part of the reason why I read so many books is the way my brain works. I have always been a very naturally gifted reader. There's no one to thank except for the big man upstairs, honestly, about that. I was reading Harry Potter when I was 6 and totally comprehending it and flying through those books. I always read so many books growing up. I've just always been a really big reader, and I filmed a video called How to Read More Books in 2022. I'll link it down below, and a lot of those tips I realized after filming aren't really applicable because it's just how my brain works. But basically, I could easily read, for example, I was at the cottage and I read this book in 2 hours. I comprehended everything that happened in it. It's just the way that I read is different, I think, than a lot of people. I'm like a skimmer and then I put the whole page together in my head. It's really hard to explain, but I do want to say that I think a huge reason as to why I read so much is just the way my brain works and how I process books and reading. But also, I just view reading as self-care. I just want to say that no one should ever make you feel like reading books is a bad thing. It's something to embrace. It's truly my form of self-care. It's like exercise to me. And I'm also a huge night owl. I think a lot of people don't realize that. So Mac goes to bed around 10 and then I usually will read from 10 p.m. till midnight. And that's like 2 hours of uninterrupted reading time every single night. And then also on the weekends, you guys know I just jam pack my weeks. It's just the way I like it. So I will jam pack obviously Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with my corporate job, Monday and Friday with YouTube, so that I can spend a bit of the weekend or parts of it at least relaxing. For example, I'm filming this on a Saturday. I have no issue with working on the weekend for a few hours, but I obviously will balance this off with a few hours of reading because it's truly how I unwind. So just to give you guys an idea on how I read so much, because I know I get this question all of the time. We also don't have children or anyone that kind of relies on us, which I do think also helps. We are just me, Matt, and Stella. And yeah, so without further ado, let's jump into it. The book I read was One of Us is Dead by Jeneva Rose. I had really high hopes for this because The Perfect Marriage is one of my all-time favorite thrillers, and I clearly need to stop going into fall or sophomore books or other books with high expectations because it just always lets me down. I'm not gonna lie. I gave this book 2.5 stars. I just really did not enjoy it. Synopsis. It's about a bunch of rich housewives and they all gather around this hair salon called Glow that their friend Jenny owns. The housewives, Shannon, recently got divorced, and so her husband married a younger, prettier girl. Her name is Crystal, and the whole book is leading up to someone dying at the end and you're trying to figure out who. Trope, suburban rich moms who drink all the time. It is a fun trope. I do enjoy thrillers like this. I just didn't enjoy this one. And trigger warnings to affairs, cheating, and murder. Hunting Wives is an example of a really good one if you're looking for one. This just missed the mark. I will say the first 3/4 of the book was really good. I really liked the slow burn leading up to the whodunit, but I hate when a thriller is insanely slow burn and then the whodunit is 3 pages and then the book wraps up really perfectly. It's not for me, and that's exactly what happened in this book. So if you like that, you might like it a little bit more. I also thought it was really dramatic who died, and I wasn't expecting it, but not in a good way. I kind of was this is stupid who dies. You know what I mean? So that's the first book. Let me down, but the next book also let me down. The book I read was The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I read this as a teenager like most of us did, but I wanted to reread it because of the Amazon Prime show coming out soon. I went into this with no expectations because it is a YA romance book, and obviously that's on the other spectrum of me loving super spicy kinky romance books, but I just was it'll be a fun light summer read. I gave this 2 stars. I don't know how I read this as a teenager. A girl named Belly, and they have a beach house with Susanna and her 2 sons, Jeremiah and Conrad. It's a whole coming of age, figure out who she's crushing on story. FYI, I read a lot of these this month, so get ready. I was really into the beach romances. And then it's told from the perspective of every year that she grows up. Tropes are summer romance, childhood friends to lovers, and beachside romance. I almost stopped reading this book so many times. Like, it took a lot for me to just power through and read it. Back on this, and I just like think it's gross that she was like crushing on 2 of them. Like, girl, just pick one and move on with your effing life, you know what I mean? And I think it puts an unrealistic expectation on like love triangles for teenagers. Could not connect with her at all. I feel like I've read some really good YA books, but she is like very immature and she's selfish. The writing is well done. That's like honestly it. Belly just like really annoyed the living daylight out of me. I did read the next ones because apparently I like to torture myself with YA romance, and I kind of was hoping that she would grow up a little bit. The quote I liked from this was, "It's the imperfections that make things beautiful, and victory is 1,000 times sweeter when you're the underdog." So that was the first one. I totally skipped the second one because I just didn't have the brain power to like put up with her again. So I did read the third one, which the third one is We'll Always Have Summer. I gave it 2.5 stars to be nice. I liked it like a tad bit more than the first one, but it still wasn't good for me. Basically, I'm assuming the second book, Belly and Conrad are together, which is one of the brothers, and then he told her to go be with Jeremiah because in the third book she's with Jeremiah. Basically they're dating. He makes a huge mistake and she's like wondering like, is she over Conrad? Does she want to be with Jeremiah? Blah, 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 blah. Trope is like a second chance romance. Oh my god. This book annoyed me more than the first one, which I didn't think was even possible, honestly. I felt like she grew up a tiny bit, but, and also this is just gonna have a spoiler in it because if you haven't read this, it's been out for like 10 years. Her boyfriend like literally cheats on her and she decides to just get married to him. Like, are you okay in the head? No plot in this at all. It's just like straight up wedding planning and not even detailed to the point where like there's a tip I could have used in the future. Like, it was just bland. And it's labeled as a romance and there's like no romance to it. So, not a fan, but I will watch this show. Also read in the past few years the To All the Boys I Loved Before books because I love the movies. So I do like Jenny Han as an author. I just really hated Belly, to be quite honest, and these characters. But there was a really cute quote in this and it said, "He didn't give me flowers or candy. He gave me the moon and the stars infinity," which is kind of sweet. But now let's move on to my first 5-star read of the month, which did not let me down. And that is the queen herself, Emily Henry, and Book Lovers. This was her best book yet, in my opinion. 5-star read, 100%. Basically, this is about Nora, who is a literary agent, so like her whole life is just about books, and she agrees to go to a small town on vacation with her sister in North Carolina. And the book is like kind of making fun of Hallmark movies because they make this like bucket list of like cheesy things to do, and it's like really cute. And basically the whole book is like all these meet cutes where she keeps bumping into this guy named Charlie, who is a book editor from back in the city, and you can obviously figure out where this is going. Tropes is like enemies to lovers and also city girl in a small town, which I love. Like I said, this is her best book yet, in my opinion. It's made for book lovers, by a book lover. It's just the perfect book. She is super relatable, smart and funny, Nora, and Charlie just like always says the right thing. The history was amazing, their emotions were amazing, their development was amazing. The ending had me actually squeal out loud, like it was so wholesome, and I never do that with a book. I'm like a silent reader. I don't cry, I don't smile, I don't make any emotion when I read, but this had me squealing. Like, I was so happy. I also really liked the grumpy versus grumpy dynamic because they're both a little grumpy, so I highly recommend. I loved it. And the quote I liked from this says, "You're in books. Of course, you don't have a life. None of us do. There's always something too good to read," which I loved. Okay, next I read this book. It was called Fool Me Once by Ashley Winstead. I'm pretty sure I picked this up on a whim at Walmart. I had never heard of it. I need to stop doing that because all the books I did that with this month, I ended up not liking. I gave this 2 stars. But I will say a huge component of that is because I'm not into political romance. I feel like romance, you have to be into like the jobs that people are doing because it's usually descriptive. So I don't like political romance, so I didn't like this, but I could see how someone would like it if that makes sense. This is about Lee. She's like a communications director, just a super badass woman. She has all these big heartbreaks, and then her ex shows up 5 years later. He's some like political dude for, you know, a liberal governor, and they're trying to pass like a clean energy bill going, and they have to work together on it. Tropes are second chance, enemies, / like workplace to lovers, It's Always Been You, and like Battle of the Exes, which is fun. This book had a lot of potential to me, But I found Lee really annoying. I think she had like no character development, and I just never rooted for her, which is kind of hard when you're reading a book. You kind of need to root for the main character. She either would like pin the blame completely or play the victim in like situations where she shouldn't have played the victim. So she's just like very hypocritical, or she's a hypocrite is what I meant to say. The romance was very flat and blah and bland in this. Like there wasn't anything to it. And like I said, I really struggle with political romance, so that could be a mistake on my part for reading this. And the one thing I will say is the book starts at Disney, so I loved that. They were like in Disneyland, and it was really, really cute at the beginning, and then it went downhill from there. So next book I read was Blame It on the Vodka. I think this is by Fiona Cole. I gave it 3 stars. It was a quick little Kindle Unlimited romance to like get me through one night. It's like a short, I don't know, it was probably like 300 pages or something, like a short little romance book. This is about Raylan and Austin, and they're best friends, and then they wake up in Vegas married. Trigger warning to domestic abuse, and tropes are like fake marriage, marriage of convenience, and friends to lovers. Like a lot of Kindle Unlimited romances that are like 3-ish stars, I honestly just don't remember much about this. It was like a very bland book. Nothing wild, nothing unpredictable, easy to read, quick read, got me out of a slump. The spicy scenes in this were pretty spicy for like nothing that was labeled spicy romance. Like it was just supposed to be like a romance book. I honestly found they did a really bad job at the whole fake marriage thing, and yeah, it was like average, I would say. I don't know, I honestly don't remember much of the book, which is how I know it wasn't that great. Okay, queens. Guys, this is the book I was the most excited to read this month. Every Summer After by Carley Fortune. I gave this 4.5 stars, but if you watch my monthly reset, you would know it was my favorite book of the month. Basically, this is about Percy and her parents by a cottage next to Sam, Charlie, and his mom. Very typical summer romance, childhood friends to strangers to lovers. Basically, the story starts in the present, and Sam's mom has died, and she's going back to Barry's Bay, where the book takes place, for the funeral, which is in Ontario. I love a good Canadian-based book. And then it goes a present chapter to a past chapter, and every past chapter goes a year in the future. And then it's over the 6 years of their friendship. Something really big happens to Sam and Percy when they're 18, and then every past chapter is like leading up to that. So it's kind of like Love in Other Words, I would say, or something like TJR, honestly. Trigger warnings to loss of a parent, cheating, anxiety, and panic attacks. Tropes are obviously like summer romance, best friends to lovers to strangers to lovers, and second chance, which is just like the holy trinity of romance tropes, in my opinion. I loved the alternating timeline in this. I thought it was really, really good. It felt really real. Like it didn't feel like a super cheesy, unbelievable romance, in my opinion, which is why I really loved it. I am shocked this is her debut novel, honestly. It was so well done that, I mean, anything else would be an auto buy for me. Like, I don't know how it could get better than this. My only criticism, and the reason I didn't give it 5 stars, like, it is a 5-star read to me, but the ending just wrapped up way too quick and perfectly for me. I wanted more from the ending, so that's the only reason I bumped it down to 4.5 stars. The conflict at the end kind of pissed me off, but the character development was great, the emotions were great, and like I said, I would have just liked to see them a bit more as a couple at the end, but it was so freaking cute. And the quote I liked was, "I've tried to forget about you for more than 10 years. I don't want to try anymore." This book pulled at my heartstrings. Pulled. Another highly anticipated book that let me down, Magpie by Elizabeth Day. This is a thriller. I gave it 3 stars. This is about Marissa and Jake, and she thinks that they are like the perfect couple. They just moved in together. They're trying to have a baby, and then they bring in a roommate to like help pay their bills. Her name is Kate. Marissa gets pregnant, and then she's like super jealous. She thinks that Kate and Jake are like having this whole relationship on the side and destroying their relationship and blah, blah, blah. Trigger warnings to infertility and mental health struggles, and the trope is just like the creepy roommate that moves in with the couple. First 2/3 of the book are 5 stars in my opinion. Like, I was like, this, yes, this is gonna meet my expectations. This is amazing. I wish that they would have just dragged that out and then ended it with a plot twist, but instead it was like the first act of the book and then the second act of the book. Right at the beginning of the second act, they put the plot twist, and then it just like continues, and you go from like super high to like this, because you have the plot twist right at the middle of the book. The whole second act was unnecessary, and it just seems like super unrealistic with the whole like happy ending and everything. I hated the evil mother-in-law component. I thought it was so unnecessary. The author had a really great writing style, however, so I'll definitely be reading other books of hers, but I just didn't like the placement of the plot twist, if that makes sense. I was hoping for it to be more like The Push by Ashley O'Drain, if you guys are familiar with that book, which is kind of like a pregnant mom thriller kind of book. But yeah, I just found that like the first half of the book amazing, and then the rest just like dragged on, super unnecessary, and kind of let me down a little. And I decided to read After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I gave this 3 stars. This is basically about Lauren and Ryan, and their marriage isn't working, so they decide to take a break for a year and not talk. And basically the story just follows Lauren, and she's trying to find herself outside of her marriage. I understand how this could be a 5-star read for people, but because I'm not in like a struggling marriage, I just don't think I could connect to it, if that makes sense. Like the thought of taking a year off from being married to someone, like I just didn't click with it. I wish we got to see more of Ryan. I wish it was maybe dual POV, like we kind of really just saw Lauren. I loved the incorporation of the letters. But my issue, and I wrote this down and I'm going to look down because I want to make sure I'm saying it properly, but my biggest issue with this book is that they clearly have a toxic and bad communication style relationship. And instead of trying to grow and reflect on things, they just like magically work through everything and get back together. And I just was like, no, you're not really fixing the root issue here. So that was a big issue for me. But I mean, once again, any TJR book for me is going to be really like soothing and easy for me to get through. So I did still enjoy it. And the quote I liked was, sometimes you need to go get the coffee more than you need the actual coffee. And so true. So true. Then I decided to read another TJR book. This is officially my last one. I've now officially read everything until Carrie Soto is back, comes out. Maybe in Another Life by TJR. Obviously, I give this 4 stars. I really loved the principle for this book. I just like love how TJR is always so unique in her plots. Like it's not, that's why I really don't like Coho, is because they're the same plots like recycled. TJR is just like very unique. This is basically a book about a girl named Hannah. She's 29, she doesn't have a job, a career, a place to call home, anything like that, and she's kind of running from a past relationship. And so she goes home to LA and goes out with her best friend Gabby, and she finds herself at a bar where she runs in with her high school boyfriend Ethan. And basically the book divides off into 2 timelines and 2 possibilities. So he's like, hey, do you want to come home with me? And then my friend Gabby's like, hey, let's go back home. And it basically just follows 2 timelines, one if she went with Ethan and one if she went home with Gabby. And I just really liked that it explored 2 alternating chapters. It kind of felt like multiverse to me if you're into Marvel. I think that's why I really liked it. It was like a multiverse book. It was a really sweet coming of age story, even though she was already 29. Like I just felt like I really connected with her. Honestly, in each chapter, like I just wanted the other person to win. Like I couldn't decide who I wanted to win, even though they're 2 different like universes. I just loved it so much. And quotes I liked are, life is long and full of an infinite number of decisions. I have to think that the small ones don't matter, that I'll end up where I need to no matter what I do. As per usual, any TJR book, you're just gonna fly through. They're so good. Then I read Watch Out for Her by Samantha Bailey. 4-star read. I love Samantha Bailey. She's the author that wrote Woman on the Edge. This is basically about Sarah and Daniel, who hire Holly to babysit their son Jacob. And Holly has like always wanted a normal family. She really feels at home with them. Like she clicks, like they're more her family than her actual family. The 2 timelines, and I thought it worked really well for a thriller. It follows the past of them integrating the babysitter into their life, and then the present, which is them moving away from Vancouver, and they move to Toronto to start over, and you're kind of trying to figure out why they're starting over. I did find the ending wrapped up a little too perfect, which is why it wasn't a 5-star read for me. Wow, it just got so dark in here. The book is set up really well. Like you kind of don't really know why they moved, if it was like mental health, infidelity, murder. Like you're really trying to figure out why. Ending just wasn't for me. I didn't see it coming and I didn't like it, to be honest. But that doesn't mean you won't like it. It's still a really, really great read. I just didn't like the ending. But the characters are well developed. There's a lot of twists and turns in the book. Like it's a really good thriller. Then I read The Stand-In by Lily Chu, which I gave 3 stars. This is a Toronto-based book by a Canadian author. Once again, it was like a really great month for these reads. This is like basically the princess switch. So it's about a girl named Gracie. She's a Chinese-Canadian female, and she looks a lot like this famous actress who, I'm going to put her name here because I really don't want to mispronounce it and offend anyone. But basically, the actress offers Grace a lot of money to be her stand-in while she goes to like events. She has to accompany the actress's like guy friend. His name is Sam. He's a super grumpy guy, and you know, like I said, it was kind of like the princess switch. You know where this is going. Trigger warnings are talk of sexual assault in the workplace, depression, and death of a parent, and the trope is like very grumpy sunshine. It was good to me. It just wasn't great. It didn't leave me wanting more. I didn't leave the book being like, wow, this was amazing. I just kind of was like, oh, this is a good book. There were a few scenes that made me really mad. The main character was just like never held accountable for her actions. I found it dragged on a little bit too long, although it was like a cute read. And I never just found myself rooting for Gracie. Like I never really found myself rooting for the main character, honestly. And I kind of finished it and was like, oh, that's it? You know what I mean? So it wasn't very memorable for me, but it was still a good read. I'll probably read more of this author's books in the future. I was just really considering rewatching Yellowstone, and instead of doing that, I was like, I'm gonna find a Yellowstone kind of book. Grumpy, cowboy, dark book. And I found it. Knotted by Pam Goodwin. I gave this 4.5 stars, which is like probably the highest I've rated a Kindle book in a while. Basically, this is about two brothers, Jake and Jarrett, and they like kind of live on this ranch with siblings Connor and Lauren. Connor is a girl, and basically Connor and Jake have been together. They're like best friends to lovers, like growing up, coming of age. But then basically something happens at the beginning of the book that changes their lives, and the two siblings, Connor and Lauren, like move away. And then you kind of flash forward to when she comes back into town a few years later. There is a huge trigger warning to sexual assault, but you could probably skip the first few chapters and still understand what's going on. Tropes are like best friends to lovers to strangers to lovers, cowboys to second chance romance. This was legit Yellowstone vibes, like 100%. I loved Connor. She was like this super independent, badass, strong lady. Pam Goodwin, I've just realized, is my first book of hers, but she's like an amazing author. She can convey so much emotion in her books, and I really loved the plot. The characters obviously had real life struggles. It was a dark cowboy romance, but it was also like really beautiful, and I really enjoyed it. So, and it's basically all about Connor, and she comes back, and it's about her and Jake kind of like trying to rekindle their romance, and it was just pulled at my heartstrings. It was exactly what I needed, honestly. Quote in this I liked was, we're a feeling that goes beyond starts and stops. We're stronger than hellos and goodbyes and deeper than beginning and ends. We're an existence that can't be measured. Then I read Hitching the Cowboy by Kennedy Fox because I was like really on a cowboy romance kick, and I gave this 2 stars. It was like so meh. I was like here with Pam Goodwin, and then I went down here with Kennedy Fox, which is shocking because I usually like her books. This is about Riley. He's a cowboy. He goes to Vegas, and then he wakes up to this strange woman named Zoe, and they're married. Obviously, they like eloped in Vegas. He's a cowboy. She's a city girl, and she wants to give their marriage a chance, so she moves to his small town Texas ranch. It was okay. The story was simple, no character development. Obviously it ends, you can tell, like happily ever after, but it was very meh to me, honestly. Like I don't really have much to even say about it. Read Funny You Should Ask by Elissa Sussman. I heard a lot about this on TikTok. I thought the cover was cute, and that's why I bought it. It was a 3-star read. Basically, it's about this girl named Chani, and she is a writer, and she does this, I don't want to say expose, it's not it, but like a writing piece on this movie star named Gabe. And this was like 10 years ago, and obviously the paper or the article goes viral, and then you flash forward 10 years later, and Chani is back in LA after she gets divorced, and they basically want them to reunite for a second interview, and then it's like all about that. So tropes are like famous, not famous, and then second chance. A lot of people were saying if Emily Henry and TJR had a book baby, it would be this, and I kind of agree. I found the past and the present very confusing, even though it was labeled like past and present. I just still found it very confusing because both timelines are focusing on writing or like doing an interview. One's just like a follow-up and one's the original interview, so I found it really hard to keep track of which one was which. I didn't like the stereotype of like a woman sleeping with a celebrity just to get an article, and the flashbacks to me like kind of accumulated to nothing. And apparently after reading this, I realized that there's a lot of controversy on this book. Apparently it is based on the GQ article for Chris Evans. Apparently like the author just didn't give them any acknowledgement or anything, even though like that's literally the whole basis for her book. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but also there was just like no chemistry between them, so I was a little disappointed with this. But to be fair, I also went into it with no expectations. I read this on Kindle Unlimited, and then I bought it because I wanted to support this author. She's in medical school and she wrote this book. N.S. Perkins, The Infinity Between Us. So good. Oh my god, 5 stars. Basically it's about Violet and Will, and they spend every summer together in Maine. It's past and present, but what I liked is that the past chapter was over one summer. So with every summer after, I think I said summer ever after earlier, but my bad. Each past chapter is a different year in their friendship, but this one is over 1 year, which I liked because you got a ton more detail. So it would be like present chapter, and then it would be past chapter, and the past chapters were all from the same summer, which like I said, I loved that. Basically, one summer disaster strikes and it tears the families apart, and you're trying to figure out what that was. And basically 5 years later, Violet shows up to sell the beach house, and she finds Will living there. And so basically he makes a deal with her that like, if you spend the summer here, we can sell the beach house at the end of the year. And so you're kind of seeing them like rekindle their friendship, and then also the past, like what led them to, I guess, like be torn apart. Tropes: second chance romance, friends to strangers to lovers, summer beach house, and forced proximity. I love the friends to strangers to lovers trope. I just think it's not always super believable, but it's just so good on your heart, and it's just so beautiful. There were so many cute moments in this book. Like every time there was a thunderstorm, he would like come sleep with her even when he was an adult. Like I just like love little moments like that in books. I like that the ending wasn't rushed compared to the other book, compared to Every Summer After. I liked that the ending, to me, the ending was better in this than Every Summer After, which is why I gave that book 4.5 stars. The ending was beautiful. I found the spice pretty steamy for like a non-spicy romance. Like it's just a normal romance. It's not labeled a spicy romance, but the spice was spicy, I will say. And I really appreciate that the supporting characters had really meaningful roles, and I really loved the book. So if you liked Every Summer After, like definitely read this. It's also in Kindle Unlimited, but I wanted to buy it and support the author because like I said, I went to her Instagram and I saw that she was in medical school, and I definitely will reread this. So really loved this. And the quote I liked from this was, "The gray of his eyes appear darker, more like a tempestuous sea than a calm sky. If I had to paint only one thing for the rest of my life, it would be this." Then I read Set on You by Amy Lea, which was a 3.5 star read for me. This was kind of cute. It's about a gym influencer named Crystal, and I really enjoy influencer books. And basically she has this platform. She's all about being body positive and being like more mid-sized, curvy, and like loving your body. He encounters this firefighter Scott at the gym when he steals her squat rack, and they just kind of become like enemies at the gym. But then she goes to her grandparents' engagement party, and they run into each other because her grandma is remarrying, and so her like step grandfather is like Scott's side of the family, and so they obviously kind of force proximity here. Trigger warnings to fat phobia and weight loss, and then tropes are like insta love, enemies to lovers, and like forced proximity within the family. I really loved the message in this book. I loved reading about an influencer. I think that they were both really well developed characters with flaws, which made it once again very relatable. She's super confident and strong-willed, and he's very like arrogant and protective. It was a really good slow burn romance. However, I hated the conflict in this. I hate a third act breakup. I thought she was so dramatic. Like I was reading the conflict and I just wanted to shake the living shit out of her. Like she was so annoying. The ending, however, made up for it. It was like cute when they came back together, but I also didn't feel like very much of a wow factor in this romance book. Like it didn't feel very romancy to me, to be honest. But the quote I liked was, "I worship the squat rack like Mother Gothel guards Rapunzel's hair. It gives me life and vigor," which I thought was so funny. Then I read The Summer of Broken Rules, which was a 4-star read. This is how YA summer romance should be done. I am obsessed with this book. I should probably buy it because I'm for sure going to read it again. This is about Meredith and her family. They have a huge property on Martha's Vineyard, and they go every summer. But this is their first summer back since her sister passed away. And it's this like huge extended family situation because her cousin is getting married. So all of the families are there and the friends, and it's like huge gathering. Basically, she gets dumped a few weeks before the wedding by her douchebag ex, and she befriends this groomsman named Whit, and it wasn't very cheesy YA romance, which is why I think I liked it. It was definitely more mature. And then the family has this tradition of playing Assassin, which is like a super fun game every year, so I loved that aspect. Like the book was really fun. The main characters were super cute and lovable. Like I said, it wasn't cheesy. It felt very mature to me. I honestly was smiling reading this, which I've said I don't usually do, and honestly this book just made me want to run away to the Cape. So super well done. Absolutely loved it. Then I read Where Good Girls Go to Die by Renee, which I think was on my Kindle or Kindle Unlimited. This is about Livy and Parker, and basically Livy and Parker are like high school sweethearts, and then obviously this huge thing happens, and then 4 years later they reunite in like a really unexpected way. Parker's engaged to another woman. Livy comes back to her hometown and starts working for him, and then yeah, you can see where the book goes. Trigger warning to cheating and miscarriages, and tropes are brother's best friend and second chance romance. Once again, I hate the cheating trope, but something I hate almost as much as the cheating trope is when there's like this super small conflict that can be resolved in 5 seconds. Like the main reason that they broke up, when you realize what it is, you're like, this could have been resolved without a breakup, like literally the whole time. It's just super frustrating. It's told in dual POV from past to present, which I love a good dual POV romance because you really get to see the man side of it as well. The ending was super abrupt to me, which I don't appreciate in a second chance romance. I also wish that the way they ran into each other at the beginning of the book was different. I didn't really like it. It was at a strip club, which once again, it's just like a personal preference, but I didn't like the way that the book started, honestly. However, he works at a tattoo shop, which I liked because it was kind of like this bad boy, good girl situation, which, and honestly, they did have really good chemistry. I would read another book by this author. Yeah, it was probably more of a 4-star, but the cheating situation and the miscommunication annoyed me. So to finish it off, I read The Doctor by Nikki Sloane, which I love anything Nikki Sloane. Like I said, it's the Filthy Rich American series. It's one of my all-time favorites. I give this 4 stars. It's the first book in the Nashville Neighborhood series. Basically, this is about Cassidy. She's home from her summer break and she has this like long-term boyfriend. His name is Preston, and she decides to break up with him because he just doesn't really seem that into her. But then her and her boyfriend's dad start getting together, Dr. Lowe, and I love a good age gap. It reminded me a lot of Birthday Girl, if you liked Birthday Girl. So obviously the tropes are like age gap and forbidden romance. And yeah, I mean, Nikki Sloane just like knows how to write spicy romance. The banter is on point. There's a lot of steam and very minimal plot. So if that's what you need, it's a good book for you. But overall, it was great. Nothing crazy happens, very predictable, but very spicy and very good. So those were all the books that I read this month. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below what your favorite book was that you read this month. I would love to know. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!